So what does that average vehicle look like, our baseline car? Well, we thought the average baseline car we should look at was the 2015, the Camry, here pictured, has 25.4 miles per gallon, has a weight of about 1,500 kg. The material makeup of this vehicle is primarily mild steel with about 20% high-strength steel in the frame and 10% in the body. And we're going to use this breakdown, so this chart on the right-hand side, as our baseline for our analysis across these different scenarios. So this is kind of the average car of 2015, 2016. This is where we are today. And let's compare these 4 scenarios that I just outlined earlier against this and see where we can get the efficiencies out of these different scenarios, okay? So here's our baseline. This is our 2015 Toyota Camry here that we described earlier. And what we're going to do in our first scenario is take a look at scenario 1, which is full carbon fiber lightweighting, no electrification, so no microhybrid technology here, or no autonomy that's been developed here. This created an efficiency of about 90% of that efficiency coming from the lightweighting itself. About 11% would be coming from changes in fuel blends and assumptions we have there. It was about 11.6 miles per gallon improvement. So this would get us to that 54.5 mile per gallon target. This particular makeup added about $2,160 to the price of the car. It decreased the weight of the car by about 480 kg. But what we thought was, this scenario is not really realistic. The price is attractive, it hits the CAFE standard, but the interesting thing about this scenario in a fully carbon fiber body and frame is that the state of the carbon fiber industry today is not ready. If we move the whole industry to this scenario, there is simply not enough material in the market to supply this. The suppliers would have to increase supply so much to meet this demand. In the next 5 to 10 years, it is just not a likely scenario. So interesting from a technology perspective, but probably not realistic from an economic or industry perspective. Let's go to scenario number 2, which looks at some major carbon fiber lightweighting here. We've added some start-stop electrification, some basic autonomy features to the car. And this gets us to that 54.5 mile per gallon target. And you'll see here that about 2/3 of the efficiency increase here, again, comes from lightweighting. And you're starting to see some efficiency come through the autonomy as well. This is certainly more expensive than scenario 1. It's added about $2,200, this is US dollars, to the price of the car. It's decreased the weight of the car by about 400 kg, and this is our highest priced scenario as well. We also aren't bullish on this scenario. This is kind of a grab bag approach. They're using a little bit of lightweighting, a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of electrification, and as a result, the overall price is quite high of this vehicle, and although it hits the standards, our analysts felt that it probably wasn't likely. If we move to scenario 3, this is a scenario where we have some minor lightweighting. We have about 8% carbon fiber in the frame and primarily moving to aluminum to lightweight the vehicle. We've implemented an advanced drivetrain. We've implemented some autonomy. And you can see here that, again, this meets the standard. About half of the lightweighting, the fuel efficiency comes from lightweighting. About 29% or 30% is coming from the electrification of the vehicle. This particular option is cheaper than the prior two. It adds about $2,100 to the price. It decreased the weight of the vehicle by about 290 kg. And actually, this is a pretty reasonable scenario from a technology perspective. This kind of makeup is almost available today. You'll kind of see this, for example, in the BMW 7 Series that's out. But these features are available today. They have just added a 12-volt microhybrid to the BMW 7 Series. It has semi-autonomous features already. So this is pretty reasonable. to consider of what that vehicle for 2025 is going to look like. But let's quickly look at our last scenario, number 4, where we move to aluminum lightweighting, we move to a 48-volt microhybrid technology, and in this scenario, the electrification of the vehicle is really the primary driver to hit that 54.5 CAFE target. It accounts for about half of the fuel efficiency gain, with another 30 or 40% coming from the lightweighting itself. It does add $1,700 to the price. It decreased the mass of the vehicle by 250 kg, and this is the cheapest option that we ran, and probably one of the easiest and most cost-effective paths. So in the interest of time, let me move on a little bit more quickly. The short story is that the analysis and the conclusion of this exercise indicates that the most likely scenario in 2025 is a car with a 48-volt microhybrid technology. It's primarily using aluminum to lightweight the vehicle with some use of carbon fiber in the frame. And there will be a little bit of autonomy features, and I want to talk about that in just a minute. But that's going to be your average vehicle sold in 2025, and kind of the makeup of what that vehicle is going to look like. And with this sort of a vehicle and these sort of specs, auto manufacturers will be able to hit the targets. So we've just looked at what that car might look like in 25. Let's take a look at what does that mean for us in the industry. What do we need to start thinking about to move in this direction? What decisions do we need to make today? And what will the impact be on us going forward? Well, one thing we know is that these 4 areas of materials, batteries, electrification, alternative fuels, and autonomy are all in play. And as I mentioned before, no one area is going to allow us to meet those targets. It's going to be a mix. What I think is an interesting dynamic that will affect the industry is how these different industries are going to play off one another. One of the most interesting dynamics we're predicting is this interplay between the materials players and the battery players, which I want to highlight here. If you think about it, the lighter the vehicle is, the farther an electric vehicle can run on a single charge, right? The bigger the battery is, the heavier the vehicle is, and the more lightweighting that is required as well. This all contributes to the concept of range anxiety. You've heard about this for the electric vehicle owner. If you look here, this is the Nissan Leaf, I believe, which has a current range of about 85 miles to maybe 100 miles. At Lux Research, our analysts indicate to have mass adoption for electric vehicles, they really need to get to a range of about 200 miles on a single charge. So the Nissan Leaf is a little bit away from that particular target here. But they're trying to figure out ways to increase that range. And one of the ways to do it is to further decrease the weight of that vehicle. An interesting play here, and almost a competition between the battery guys and the material guys with the OEM. And I think OEMs are going to play these 2 supply chains against one another. So that's at the far kind of lower end. At the higher end, you see this image on the right side. This is the Life module from BMW i3 electric vehicle. It's an all-carbon frame and body, pretty high-end vehicle, also out of my price range in case you were interested. But this is an example at the high end where BMW is actively looking to decrease the weight of that vehicle, specifically to increase the range of the car so they can accommodate a larger battery pack for that particular vehicle. So, implications for energy storage suppliers here and battery companies. Electrification is coming. It cannot be avoided. It is the future. If you're not thinking about electrification now, you're behind the game. It will impact your business. Just to give you some examples, today, obviously, lithium-ion batteries are well in place, and you have players like A123 Systems and Johnson Controls firmly in the market. You start to move down the supply chain a little bit with some more advanced alternatives. coming from Toshiba and Leclanché. You continue to move into some other types of electrification, like supercapacitors to be paired with a battery to use for start-stop functionality and power off the line. And these would be companies like Nippon Chemicon and Maxwell. And then you can even get into some really exotic materials as well and alternative chemistries with companies like Axion Power and Powergenics. And the reason I show this to you is to demonstrate that some of these more exotic technologies, now this isn't fiction, this is here today. And OEMs are lining up with suppliers now, and to participate, you need to be in the game today. In terms of automation, what are the implications? Well, this is an interesting category. One thing we found was that the advent and the introduction of automation into a vehicle doesn't really move the needle on fuel efficiency or hitting those CAFE standards. We think that, at the most, you're going to get a couple of points of fuel performance by introducing basic or advanced automation. However, OEMs will continue to adopt automation, not for fuel efficiency reasons, but for safety reasons, okay? So that'll be the key and main driver here. We predict that by 2025, automated vehicles will be about an $80 billion opportunity for OEMs in this space. So it's coming, it's here, you need to start planning for that now. And the smart OEM and the smart supplier will be thinking about using autonomy for safety and not really considering it for fuel efficiency. On the fuel side, we looked at all sorts of different innovations and improvements in fuel. In 2017, it's pretty much an E10 92 scenario. And as we move forward by 2021, we're going to see the adoption of E25. And as we move forward by 2025, we're going to get to E25 99 octane ratings. But again here, you're going to see only a marginal improvement in fuel efficiency to hit those CAFE standards. It's going to be about 5 to 7% on average by changing fuel blends as well. Okay. So what does that mean? That kind of leaves materials, nanomaterials, interesting new advanced materials, and electrification as the place to focus. Here's another interesting example of how this plays out. We looked at how much weight you have to remove from the vehicle in these different scenarios in order to hit that particular CAFE standard. And this is the chart on the right-hand side. If you have no electrification, so this is a standard internal combustion engine vehicle, you need on average to remove about 500 kg of weight from that car to be able to hit that 54.5 mile an hour standard. If you introduce a 48 volt electrification into that vehicle, you only need to remove about 200 kg from that car. So really the play here of materials and electrification is critical and the pathway to move forward for OEMs to be able to hit these particular standards and these areas. So we've looked at what the average car looks like. I want to spend just a few moments on some edge cases. What does the not average car look like as well? Well, certainly there's the luxury market, illustrated here maybe by that BMW i7 series. Interesting vehicle. They're implementing some of these technologies today, and they're well on the path of hitting these standards. On the not luxury side, so this is probably more in my budget, this is, I don't know if you've seen this before, this is the Senna. From Amsterdam. This is on the streets in Amsterdam today. This is a single vehicle passenger car, so one person can fit. It does not drive on the roads. It uses bike lanes. It just uses the bike lanes in Amsterdam. But for someone who lives in the city, what a great vehicle to have, and it's plenty, it's just fine. But both of these are edge cases that I want to just talk a moment about, because even though they're edge cases, there are still opportunities for advanced materials and innovations here as well. On the luxury side, certainly lightweighting and carbon fiber is here today, as we saw in the BMW i7 series as well. Electrification is in this market as well. It's not only going to be used for efficiency, but electrification is also used for performance, getting torque off the line, for example, and start-stop and braking conditions on the track. Maybe you have seen this car in the most recent James Bond movie. This is the Jaguar CX-75, which is certainly a high-performance vehicle. It is an electric vehicle as well, and it is kind of known to have the performance of a Bugatti and the efficiency of a Prius, if you can believe that. So if you can write the check today, you can have one of these today as well. But the point is that even in the edge case of the luxury market, you have innovative advanced materials and innovative electrification hitting this market. On the far end of that spectrum, let's go back to the Senna in Amsterdam. The kind of mega trend of urbanization is going to be driving that forward. It's playing a huge role in moving us forward in this area. There's a potential play here for advanced and alternative fuels, bioblends. If you think about a single person transport and you're just moving around the city, you don't need to travel 200 miles. Maybe you're just traveling like 10 kilometers a day, and that's perfectly fine. So you don't need extensive charging stations. You don't need extensive fueling stations around. In this scenario, materials and fuels can play an important role. Down below is a prototype single passenger vehicle that's at the high end. If you don't need fueling stations and charging stations everywhere, and you're only driving in the city and you're not driving on the highway, you don't need to pass highway crash tests anymore. You're not crashing on the highway. Your speeds are lower. That opens up all kinds of possibilities for new polymers and composites to use for the body and for the frame. All are in play today. So, cars that don't crash in the future are absolutely rewriting the paradigm for advanced materials. Let me take a quick look at the Mercedes 2015 S-Class. This has adaptive cruise control, this has emergency braking, this has self-steering. All these driver assist features are in play today, and crashes will become much less frequent. If you think about what the Mercedes S-Class will look like in 2030 or 2035, when a car doesn't crash, you don't need to have a steel body. You don't need to have an aluminum body. You can use advanced polymers for the body and the frame, opening up all kinds of new decisions and applications for not only design, but functionality and efficiency as well. So, playing in this efficiency game means competing in all of these four segments. You're competing with advanced materials and advancements in advanced material suppliers. You're competing in the energy storage area and electrification and battery players. You are competing with autonomous systems and driver assist features. You are competing with alternative fuels players. And each one of these in isolation doesn't hit the standard, but combined together will help OEMs hit the regulatory requirements that they must hit going forward. So in conclusion, what do we find? Well, we found that the need to hit efficiency regulations is here, and that this will be the key driver for the automobile of 2025. In order to meet these efficiency demands, automakers will rely on aluminum, lightweighting. It doesn't mention it here, but there will also be carbon fiber introduced into the frame. 48-volt microhybrids will become the norm, as well as increasing changes to the fuel blend, whether it's a biofuel or ethanol blend or some other blend. Autonomy and automation is coming, but it will be here not necessarily for efficiency, it will be here for safety. And the more safe the car can be, the more lightweight the vehicle can be, the farther the range will be, and the more interesting materials that we can use for that vehicle. And finally, if you're playing in this space and you want to be a player in this market in 2025, which is around the corner, you start to need to be thinking about this multi-system feature of the car in these four categories: electrification, materials, fuels, autonomy, sensors and software. These will all be competing for a slice of that efficiency pie, and it should be an important part of your strategy to make sure you have a story or a strategy focused in each of those four areas going forward. I'm with